The rope creaked before she did. It swayed slightly in the dry wind, the fibers stretched tight around her wrists as she hung against the rough wooden post in the center of the town square, her arms pulled high above her shoulders until even breathing felt like a punishment. The sun stood directly overhead, merciless and still, baking the dust into the ground and the silence into the people watching. Her name was Lila Mercer, though no one had said it out loud since they dragged her out here at dawn, as if stripping her of her name made what they were doing easier to accept. Her lips were cracked, her voice nearly gone, but still she tried. "Please," she whispered, the word barely reaching the men standing just a few feet away. One of them, a tall, narrow-eyed man with a coil of rope in his hand, didn't even look at her. He spat into the dirt instead, as if her voice wasn't worth the effort. The other, thicker, heavier, the one who had ordered this, stepped closer, tilting his head as he studied her face like it was something already broken. "No one's coming," he said quietly, not loud enough for the crowd, just for her. "You should have known better." A few doors shifted open along the street, just enough for eyes to peek through. No one stepped out. No one spoke. A woman on a balcony turned away. A man near the saloon lowered his gaze. The town had decided already. This wasn't their fight. Lila tried to pull against the rope again, her shoulders burning, her feet barely touching the ground, but it only made the fibers bite deeper into her skin. The post behind her was warm from the sun, solid and unyielding, like the judgment pressing in from every direction. One of the men laughed under his breath. "Look at her," he muttered, "still thinks someone cares." And for a moment, it almost felt true. The wind died. The street went still. And then, from the far end of the road, a single set of footsteps broke the silence. Not rushed, not loud, just steady enough to be heard by the ones who were listening for anything to change. He didn't announce himself, didn't call out. He just walked, boots pressing into the dust with a calm that didn't belong to this place. The brim of his hat cast a shadow over his eyes, his face unreadable as he came into view, stopping just at the edge of the crowd that had formed without admitting it had. No one greeted him, no one warned him. The men at the post hadn't noticed yet, still wrapped up in their own small cruelty. But Lila did. Through the blur of heat and pain, she lifted her head just enough to see him standing there, still, quiet, watching, not angry, not afraid, just present, and for the first time since they tied her up, something shifted inside her. She didn't know who he was, but she stopped begging. The moment stretched longer than it should have, like the town itself was holding its breath, unsure whether this new presence meant anything at all. The stranger didn't move right away. He stood there with the same quiet weight, letting the scene unfold in front of him, as if measuring something no one else could see. Finally, one of the outlaws turned, catching sight of him. His expression changed, not fear, not yet, but irritation, like someone had stepped into a story that wasn't theirs. "What are you looking at?" he called out, his voice cutting through the heat. The stranger didn't answer. He took a single step forward, slow enough to seem almost casual, but deliberate enough that the dust rose softly around his boots. That was when the second man, the heavier one, noticed him too. He straightened, eyes narrowing beneath the brim of his hat. "You got business here?" he asked, louder this time, making sure the crowd heard it. The stranger kept walking until he stood a few paces away from the post, close enough to see the rope digging into Lila's wrists, close enough to see the exhaustion in her eyes. He didn't look at the men first. He looked at her. Just for a moment. And in that moment, something passed between them. Something quiet. Something certain. Then he turned his gaze to the men. The street tightened around them, every onlooker suddenly aware that whatever happened next would break the silence they had all been hiding behind. "You should leave," the thinner outlaw said, his hand drifting toward his gun, not fully committed but ready to become something more. The stranger's face didn't change. He didn't reach for a weapon, didn't raise his voice. He simply stood there, letting the stillness grow heavy enough to be felt. Then, without warning, he lifted his head slightly, just enough for the shadow of his hat to shift, revealing eyes that carried a kind of calm that didn't belong to men who lost. When he finally spoke, It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "Cut her down." The words landed harder than a shout, precise and cold, slicing through the air like they had already decided the outcome. The thinner outlaw scoffed, taking a half-step forward. "You think you can—" He started, but the sentence didn't finish. Because something in the stranger's stillness stopped him. Not fear, exactly. Not yet. But doubt. The heavier man looked between them, his jaw tightening, trying to hold on to the control he had just moments ago. "This ain't your concern," he said, though the certainty in his voice had begun to crack. The stranger didn't respond with more words. He didn't need to. He just took one more step forward, closing the distance, his presence pressing into the space between them until it felt like there was no room left for threats. The wind stirred again, lifting dust and tension together. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Lila felt it, the rope shifting slightly, the tension easing just enough to be noticed. One of the men hesitated, and that hesitation was everything. The stranger hadn't drawn a gun, hadn't raised a hand, but whatever he carried with him, whatever history lived behind those eyes, it was enough. The thinner outlaw looked away first, stepping back like the ground beneath him had changed. The heavier one cursed under his breath, then reached up with rough, reluctant hands and began to loosen the rope. It wasn't quick, it wasn't kind, but it was happening. The fibers slipped free, and Lila's arms dropped suddenly, her body collapsing forward as her strength gave out. Before she hit the ground fully, she caught herself, shaking, breathing hard, alive. The men stepped away without another word, their earlier confidence replaced with something quieter, something they wouldn't name. The stranger didn't watch them go. He only stood there until the rope fell to the dirt and the post stood empty again. Lila stayed where she was for a moment, her hands trembling as she looked up at him, searching for something, an explanation, a reason, a name. "Why?" she managed, her voice barely holding together. The stranger paused, then glanced once at the crowd, at the doors beginning to close, at the town retreating back into itself. "Because they wouldn't," he said simply. Then he turned, pulling his hat down just enough to hide his eyes again, and walked away, leaving behind a silence that felt different now, like something had finally been broken and something else, just as quiet, had taken its place.